So today we're going to be looking at some, of course, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, first edition. And I've been asked a lot of questions about how to make combat a little bit less I strike, you strike, and to also run through some of the theatre of mind sort of styles. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at basically some movement and also ranges, and as in distance range, not rangers themselves, and have a look at combat and how we can make, or how we can try and make combat a little bit less static in its approach. So what we'll do is we'll get started on that. So I just want to thank everybody, of course, because it's been a long time between drinks, and I've really been trying to work on this particular topic. I've had a lot of requests, I've had a lot of questions about it, and I really wanted to delve into it in a methodic way and also come out with something that's beneficial, that hopefully will help people, and something that we can revisit a couple of times just to sort of go over and say, okay, that's a good idea, that's not a good idea, and so on. As usual, we'll be sticking to the rule set as much as humanly possible, as you do, but there might be some elements that people will go, well, it doesn't really say that, and they're probably right, but we also have other ideas. So let's run through it all and we'll work it out together. Alright, so I probably won't get anything else out about D&D until after the Grogtalk, so which is happening in a couple of weeks, which is fantastic, in Orlando. I'm going over there and having a look. So if you're in Orlando or near Orlando, stop on by, come on through, check it out. So that's like the 20th, 21st, 22nd of September. It's going to be awesome. Lots of old grognard types and D&D, as well as a few other games and so on. But anyway, so we're going to be looking at this today, and hopefully we'll follow it up with some further questions, and we can explore it from there. All right, let's go. All right, so let's start from the top, shall we? A fighter with a longsword has a 3-foot space required. Now what that means is that you're looking at being able to use all that space in order to engage an opponent and to basically do some moving around. This isn't the same as running, jumping, leaping, moving around, but back and forth, left and right, up and down, being able to use the area that's surrounding the fighter for swinging the sword, for stabbing, thrusting, cutting, slashing, and so on. So once we've got that down as an idea, then we can have a look at the next step. So from here, we can see that a fighter running with, say, chainmail armor or magical plate, but generally we'll stick with the idea of chainmail armor, gives you 9 feet as your movement to engage. So if we look at the sections on combat, and we can see that we have an area that says that you can move into striking distance, and then the next phase, strike. That moving into striking distance has been listed under the DMG as about 1 inch or about 10 feet. About 10 feet includes 6 feet, 9 feet, 12 feet. And where this comes from is that we know that when we're in segment combat for surprise, we use segment movement, which means that we're using our inches in feet per 6 seconds as the actual movement rate. We also know that when we're trying to charge, or when we're trying to set up a charge, we have 1.5 times the distance. And that distance isn't calculated in terms of overall movement or even beyond that 1 inch zone. Otherwise, someone with plate mail armor of a 6-inch move, charging would go 15 feet, because if we stuck to the hard fast rule that 1 inch is 10 feet, and when the Gygax says that it's about 1 inch, we're sticking to that hard and fast 1 inch rule. Then what we're looking at is when a character charges in full plate armor, they're moving further than if they were just in normal combat move or in normal movement. So essentially everything is pointing towards the idea that you use this movement, and as intended you are, but of course as intended is not the same as a hard fast rule written down, but there are other elements around these hard fast rules that indicate this. So using Gygaxian logic, we can extrapolate to the point of, well, this is the most logical answer and this is where we need to go with it. Yep, okay, I get it. Some people sort of go, but it says, and yes, it does, but that's not exactly what he means. He just means that it's about 1 inch. It's about 10 feet, and it is about 10 feet. When you move forward 9 feet, you're about 10 feet. Essentially, combat is close quarters and angry and aggressive and fast and furious, and we know that it's a full minute round. So we've got a lot of jumping back and forth, moving in and out, and so on. So essentially what we're going to do is look at here. Now what we want to do is see how that actually works out once we've thrown into a small scenario. Here's a corridor 10 feet wide. We have 3 orcs with short swords, and we have our fighter with the longsword. As you can see, the fighter to the front 2 guys are roughly 10 feet. Essentially what we're looking at is that the fighter has come out of a room, walked around the corner, something, whatever it is. There it is. There's some orcs right in front of them, and we're not doing surprise, but neither side is surprised. We're just going to use that as the rule. And here we are. So the question comes to the player, what do you want to do? And then we can roll for initiative. So the player has to decide what it is that they're going to do, which is going to be move to striking distance and then engage in combat. What are the orcs going to do? Now, of course, the orcs already have what they're going to do because the DM's already figured it out. Now, in all of these scenarios that we're talking about and everything we're doing here, the DM has an advantage because obviously they don't go around telling everybody what it is they're doing, but also they know how to play. Now, all of this is theatre of the mind. This is what is happening inside the head of the Dungeon Master at the time. They might draw up a whiteboard marker, there might be dry erase, there might be a piece of paper with some bits of scrolls on it, much similar to this, but it won't be to this level of minutiae. But in the DM's mind, whilst trying to figure out combat, this is what is actually thinking about in the DM's head as we're creating the combat round and what we're going to do. So we know that there are 2 options, well, 3 I suppose. The orcs will win initiative, the fighter will win initiative, or it'll be tied, which will sort of be about the same as, because they'll both clash in the middle, so that's fine. But what we're looking at here is 3 orcs, 2 that are within striking distance of the fighter and 1 that is not. So this is what the fighter and the orcs are going to be thinking about. Now, as I said, in terms of thinking of theatre of the mind, this is exactly what is going on. So the fighter comes around the corner or comes out of the room, and is a matter of, hey, here's the extension of the corridor, and there are 3 orcs in front. Neither side are surprised, so now it's time to look at initiative and see what we're doing with that. So here we go with the orcs winning initiative. This is where we are to start with, 1, 2 and 3, and this is where they will move to. As you can see, we've got our space required for the short swords. What is also interesting is that we have obviously 1 and 2 engaging with the fighter, and number 3 is sitting in that back corner. So from the position back here, this orc is not able to engage in any actual combat activity with the fighter because it's further than the 9 feet and it's not able to be charged. So essentially from here, we're looking at this orc being able to move anywhere, but it's sacrificing its combat. For this round, next round, it will have a flanking attack. So what we have in the first round, if the orcs win initiative, they move forward, engage with the fighter. You've got orcs 1 and 2 having a crack, orc number 3 not, and then it's the fighter's turn. Now if you remember what the fighter looks like in terms of its overall position and how much space it's got to play with, suddenly it's jammed up in this back corner. Now if a DM wanted to, they could easily adjust the combat chart just a little bit to accommodate for the fact that the fighter now is in cramped quarters and doesn't have as much space and room and to freedom of movement as they would like. And that's something that the DM can also think about, which is the reason why we need to work a little bit more as a DM, because we can see in our head how these fighting styles are and we know what they're doing. A player doesn't think like this, which is the pity, but that's where I'm hoping that players from here on out will be able to look at combat and explain a little bit more in terms of, well, this is what I think we need to be doing. And in a quick, smart mode, of course. So here we have the orcs applying some pressure onto the fighter, essentially pushing the fighter into that back corner. And then the fighter has an option of continuing to fight with the 2 orcs in front, and then allowing the 3rd orc to have a flank attack or a rear attack from behind, as rear attacks are, in the next round, or move themselves into a position so that they've angled all 3, so maybe just losing a shield bonus, but not so much becoming a flank or having an advantage, like providing an advantage to the enemy. So what happens if the if the fighter wins initiative? Well, the fighter moves forward and takes it from there. Essentially that's the same if the result was tied. You're looking at that just happening a few feet earlier, but the fighter moves forward as fast forward as they can. This effectively blocks orc number 3 from engaging in anything, because orc number 3 can't get past and can't run past or move through anywhere near that fighter. Otherwise, even though we don't use the term currently, attack of opportunity, we do later and we understand what it means. If the orc number 3 decides to try and run through the control zone of the fighter, you're looking at the fighter potentially getting a good shot against the orc and turning it into a blood mist. Especially if the orc fighter at this stage is a lower level fighter, in which case then you're looking at 3 orcs being really quite chunky for a fighter to engage in, especially like maybe up to about levels 2 or 3. They might start to pick up some ability to be able to take on some fighters, take on some orcs, just at 2 or even maybe 3. But at this stage, at levels 1 and 2, definitely the orcs are more than an equal match for a fighter, even with their short swords. Let's look at a more chunkier scenario. So what we're looking at are a couple of different options, but basically it creates the same sort of level of battlefield. And what we're looking at is that a party of adventurers are moving down a corridor or moving down a tunnel or moving down a pathway. When they move into an area that is a little bit larger with approximately 30 by 40 in terms of the actual battlefield zone or the area that is encompassed by the actual map. And inside you're looking at a pillar or a stalactite, stalagmite, or something that's in the way, that's in the middle of the room, that creates a bit of a blockage that that goes from ceiling to floor, or goes from the floor to most of the way up through to the ceiling. But essentially what we're looking at is something that allows the just to sort of create a bit of a blockage, just that we have to move around and generally use as some cover, or even as an obstacle that we can put in the way. So this is what the room looks like. Essentially, we have the pathway in, and we have the pathway out. We have our obstacle in the middle, that we're using, and we've got the area marked out with the grids and a 10 by 10 zone, so each square is a foot. That way we can do it. As I said, all of this is designed in terms of theatre of the mind, but this is how a DM actually thinks and should be looking at the battlefield mentally and clearly, so that way when the players want to do something, in their heads they've got them positioned where they're supposed to be positioned in order to be able to engage and do what they need to do. So essentially what's happened is that the adventurers have arrived from the top of the map. They've walked into an area, and somewhere in the back corner we have some goblins that are currently playing a game of bones, or something along the lines of like throw the stick against the wall or something. Essentially they're just doing a thing, and the players have stumbled into it and interrupted them. So again, no surprise, but straight up we're looking at a scenario where we have our party coming in and the goblins are ready down below. So these are our players, or this is the party as they've entered into the area. So we have our fighter thief, a ranger, a fighter, magic user, and a cleric. Down below we have our 8 goblins. They're all playing a game or something, and now they've been interrupted. So, players, declare your actions. As we said, we're not going to run with this level of minutiae for every single battle and not for every single encounter, but it's definitely something that in the head of the DM, this is what we're looking at. And as far as the players are aware, they've come in from the north, and in that space they've got some goblins in the back corner, and they have to a few seconds to decide what it is that they're going to do, and the DM's going to say, declare your actions, and then we'll roll for initiative. So what the players have to do is create a defined plan quickly. It's not a QB huddle, but it is something where they need to go, okay, this is what we need to have planned, so that way they can get it all moving forward as they need to, and to protect themselves or to try and stop someone from escaping down this way, which potentially is not in what the party are wanting to have to happen. So from the DM's point of view, they know that from these goblins down here, essentially number 7 is going to try and do an end run and get out this way to escape, make an alert, or find some more reinforcements or something. And 1 through, well, all the rest of them will make their way to try and engage and block, hold, and keep all the characters there long enough so that the reinforcements come back in. But with the the goblins taking initiative, if they seize initiative, then that's essentially a string of movement for 7 of them up to here that don't require them to be obviously able to attack, because it's well past the safe zone. They have to actually move and not be able to engage in attack, and number 7 there being able to come on through and disappear down the bottom end. The magic user, okay, let's assume that the thought process is, should I cast sleep? And it's a matter of, do I want to send a sleep spell now? Mark it into that back corner, which will cover half of the room. However, if the magic user loses initiative, then all of their movement will end up being outside of that space, and it will be a wasted spell. Not that the players know exactly what the enemy are going to do, but they do know that the enemy will move to engage and come forward. Just like when you ask what is it you're going to do, the players should come up with a plan where they say the fighter and the ranger will engage on the short side or around one side of the big pole, pylon, or column. The cleric will come around on the other side. The fighter thief will block the door or block the exit in order to be able to make sure that they've got something that they can do there. And the magic user just stays out of harm's way to begin with. If necessary, jump out, cast a spell of some description, whether it's magic missile to clear off a couple of nasties, or even the sleep. Because I mean, essentially at the lower levels, sleep affects everybody, even the players. So when you're rolling a lot of those dice to work out how many hit dice get affected, you could end up knocking out your own players if you're not careful enough with an exact delivery of location. So from a player's perspective, what it will look like is this. After they've declared that the fighter and the ranger will move along one side of the column, the cleric coming in to protect part of that pathway, and the fighter thief to protect the doorway, and the magic user behind. Essentially this puts the goblins into a position where 7 can't run through or past the fighter thief without engaging an attack of some description. 3 and 4 are able, 5 and 4 are able to essentially charge the thief. Now, none of the orcs in their minds had charge as a thought. It was all move to engage. So essentially, everyone is just going to be moving to engage. They're not actually moving in order to charge. They're moving to get into a range or into position. So most of 4 of them will come up here, potentially, because the aim of the goblins, the aim of the goblins is a drinking game. The aim of the goblins is to lure the thief away from the door to allow number 7 to run through, or at least one of them to back off and escape. So if they can pull the thief towards the inside of the room, and they do that by moving to engage in some way, and then forcing the thief to have to move forward to engage with them. Hopefully delivering enough of a space that someone can disappear and get past. As I said, all of this, theatre of the mind, all that the players know is they've walked in, they've come in from the north, the room itself is mostly bare with not a lot of it involved in its description. There might be broken bits of furniture or something that's just sort of said that it's an older room that's being used but not in a constructive way. There's a massive column in the middle of the room or near the middle of the room that goes from floor to ceiling, or is large enough that it's an obstruction. In the back corner, as you've walked into the room, you've interrupted a game of bones, or throw the stick against the wall, or throwing a stone, and just a game of chance, whether it's cubes or something, and they have interrupted that game, which has brought attention to themselves. So declare your actions, and then we'll get on with initiative. Declaring my actions as the player, I'm doing that, I'm doing that, I'm doing that. And we roll for initiative and we go for it from there. Now remembering that if the initiative was in the favour of the goblins, number 7 disappears and the rest of the goblins jam up the PCs up here, hopefully getting into a space where the fighter and the ranger aren't able to be as effective because they won't have as much space themselves to fight in, and that will affect their combat effectiveness as well as how well they hit. That is a key to working out these movements. You've got to, as the DM, you don't want to arbitrarily just walk around and just going, nope, you don't have space, ding ding ding. But you need to make it aware to the players that they don't have as much room to maneuver or to play with as they would like to think. And that's something that lends itself to the next part of the conversation, which is something that's attached to the morale section, where it talks about fallback and fighting. And this is where we have a look at that, and it's actually related to the way that we engage in combat and disengage as well. So using roughly the same amount of space that we were using before, what we've got are 2, we'll call them fighters, and they're engaged with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bugbears, because bugbears are nasty and they can just jump out of everywhere. They're so silent. Again, we're not dealing with surprise, we're just dealing with the fact that we've got suddenly 2 fighters that are surrounded by 5 creatures. Again, we're looking at how these creatures engage in combat, as well as how the fighters engage back and how much space they need. So if both fighters are running with short swords and the bugbears are running with, let's say, broadswords, because they run by weapons, then you're looking at space required all over the place, and the idea is that the bugbears will be trying to jam the fighters into a corner or into each other so that it becomes harder for them to maneuver and combat easier. As it is at this stage right here, you're looking at 2 on the right hand side, numbers 3 and 4, that are engaging with the fighter, and you've got 1, 2 and 5 engaging with the other one, with number 5 being an attack either on the flank or at the very least without a shield bonus and gaining an advantage in some way. So with that, and being outnumbered that many, perhaps it's best for the players to figure out what they can do to actually withdraw. So this is where we have the fallback fighting. I mean, we've got a scenario where NPCs, not so much maybe henchmen, but definitely NPCs, definitely monsters, definitely men-at-arms, and all sorts of manner of 0 levels. When they retreat en masse in big numbers and they disappear. If you do a full retreat or a full disengage, of course you allow for an attack to be made by the enemy, which is actually performed with a number of bonuses and adjustments, because essentially they've got all these extra, you don't get your dexterity adjustment, it's like an attack from behind and so on. So when you're attacking somebody who's retreating, you get some free hits, and you get some, free attempts, not so much free hits, but free attempts. There's this one element that's called fallback fighting, and that means comfortably when it gets to the declaration stage, that's exactly what the players or the DM is figuring out. Fallback fighting. Just as when we engage in combat, we move forward toward the enemy, to the closest enemy in terms of the feet per round, we do the same thing with disengagement. Now in this instance I'm given the 12 hit, I'm assuming that it's magical chainmail, we're a few levels up. If we go up against 5 bugbears, it's not exactly a low level encounter. So let's give the fighters a bit of a chance. When we roll for initiative, what the fighters can also do is use that very, very infrequent use of the parrying, where they sacrifice their to hit rolls from strength, and only from strength, to buff up their armor class. That way, even if the bugbears attack first, you might just get a pip or two onto your armor class whilst you're parrying. Then when it's the fighter's turn, they fall back fighting. And by falling back, they have shields up, weapons still ready, and they move back a number of feet equal to their movement. What this does is essentially, it still keeps them engaged in combat. They haven't disengaged in combat as of yet, they're still in combat, but what happens is that the next round, the fighters can fall back again, fight, let's say their whole sort of thing, fall back fighting, and the monsters are in a position where if they are able to engage, they will be able to move forward and engage. If they're in charging distance, they can declare a charge, or in the DM's thinking, right, I just get my guys to get the monsters to charge, which is their one charge for the next 10 rounds or whatever, if they haven't already, and roll for initiative. So again, once they've moved back, then it's the monsters will either move to engage, in which case then the players, the PCs will then do another parry and move back, or if the PCs get their opportunity to go first, they will just move out of range again and be so far out of range that the monsters won't be able to actually charge and get into combat, which is good. That's what the PCs want. Then they can flee. Then you can turn around and run because you're not actually engaged in combat at that point. That's when you're really disembarking from combat. So in a much larger space, you could just imagine that the fighters could just keep going back until they get to a clear zone of winning initiative a couple of times and being able to jump out of the combat. Same thing with monsters, they can do the same thing. You've got lines of orcs that just fall back fighting. They can just move back, enticing players to come charging forward, and you end up with them being left on their own, whereas the faster ones or the more maneuverable ones are in spaces that they can't make it around. So that's assuming that these two are fighters. Now comes the next coolest thing that we absolutely love, and that's, let's imagine it this way. Obviously, if you're a thief, you have a 12-foot move because you're in leather armor, and if you're essentially a bard, you're in leather armor or you're in magical chainmail, which gives you a 12-inch move. So you've got that freedom of flexibility of moving around and getting out and about. Now, if one of these was a monk, and monks have no space required for their open hand attacks, meaning that they don't have to worry too much at all about being jammed in a corner, or even just having to worry about how many can you fit side by side. As long as you can fit people into a corridor, you can put monks next to each other and they just move forward and attack, or move back or move around. When you've got an open space, it's so much better for characters like monks who can do end runs and constantly be moving to engage an enemy in the flank, where they're totally zip all the way around. They've got 15 feet at first level, then it goes up by a foot along the way. So by the time they're 17th level, they've got 32 foot. So when you're a Grandmaster of Flowers, you have 32 feet of movement, where you're practically doing 2 laps around just because you can, and then picking your target that you're going to crush. And at the middling levels, so when you've got your 5th, 6th level monk, if you get that high obviously, you're looking at 20 feet. So this is a class that is constantly in motion. They are moving around, they are back and forth, and they are the first ones in and the first ones out of combat, which is important to remember, because when you're moving your characters around, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to position them so that you can lure the enemies to be in a worse position, or moving your character into a position of benefit. Benefit is flanks and rear attacks. So even though backstab is a special ability and thieves love to go backstab, just general attacks from behind have no defensive adjustments, have pluses on there, 2 hits in normal manner, and so on. And if you can attack someone from behind, that's good. That's how we want to do these things. There's an old saying that says that if you're in a fair fight, you've done something wrong. And essentially, players, they love that. They love being able to overwhelm their enemy. They love having 6 of them against 4 or 5 of these other enemies, and they can try and crush them. And whilst as a DM, your job isn't to overly crush the players, it's to challenge them. It's to get them to be better players. It's to get them to encourage that. So you get them to say, how are you moving? Ask them that question. How are you moving around? You're in an area where you don't have enough space. You're in a corridor that's 10 feet wide. You've got 2 fighters that have long swords. How are you coordinating this? And you'll hear players say, oh, but they just always practice together. And it's like, then if that's the case, why is this the first time that I'm hearing about that? Because there are times during the day when clerics have to pray and magic users have to read books in order to be able to gain their spells. So in those hours, hour and a half, 2 hours every day, what is it that the fighters are doing? What are the fighters doing? Well, they are practicing, they sure, but they're practicing individually. They're not exactly practicing coordinated strikes. But this is where, as players, they can get together and go, we're practicing how to swap opponents. We're practicing how to jump, so that if you've got your 18 dexterity thief or monk that's insane, they can use the backs of the players at the front to jump over and about, on top of or behind, and so on, which require a little bit of practice. You can't just suddenly do those things. As having a high dexterity doesn't always mean that you have these abilities, but it certainly does help. So in this sort of scenario where you've got 2 characters surrounded by 5 potentially equal or slightly rougher threats, they need to always remember that they can fall back, and that fallback fighting is the perfect move for that. And that's how we're able to engage and disengage from that type of combat. So hopefully this is something that we've covered well enough for everyone, and it's something that is, like as I said, as a DM, we generally do in our heads run these scenarios, and we do run this. And when you're doing theatre of the mind, you've got to keep the battlefield in your head as to what it's supposed to look like. Having pictures is fine, and having miniatures is okay, and all of that. Sometimes it doesn't quite get that movement that we want, or doesn't get to this level of minutiae, which really helps. But in your head, this is where you've got to be at as a DM. And when you can plan that battle, that skirmish fight, this is how it's likely to go down. And remember, orcs, they're not very smart. Goblins aren't very smart. Bugbears aren't very smart. Ogres are definitely not very smart. However, they do fight. They fight a lot. They fight together, they fight with each other, and they fight everyone that comes in their space. So they know what they're doing, and they know how to engage and how to use their own tools. So as your players become better and better coordinated, so too do the villains. Let them get a little bit better. Let them have a taskmaster that holds them together, and that forms the lines and boosts their own morale, and so on. The witch doctors or the shamans, the clerics have a spell that allows them to bolster morale or drive them into a fury, so that morale is in something, right? They can do whatever they need to be able to. You can get them to be whatever they need them to be in order to be able to achieve their thing. And it also helps it helps that you're improving your game, and your helps that the players to up what they're doing, because that's what it's all about. We want to have fun, but we want to be challenged by it as well. We don't want to just sort of have a steamroller, and everyone gets tired of a roll to hit, because that's how they see it. And that's essentially what's happened with the modern era game, and that's what happened with games as they move down. We went from a 1 round, full minute swirling melee of a fighter moving back and forth, left and right, up and down, over, bun, up, down, dump, parry, riposte, thrust, all that. We move away from that to I roll a strike, I roll a hit, I roll a strike, I roll a hit, I roll a damage, I roll a strike, I roll a damage, and it just becomes hit to hit, and it becomes less of an argy-bargy, less of two soldiers clashing and spinning in the middle with shields and sword and an occasional knee in the groin and a kick and a push and a shove. That's all of what encompasses a combat round. And the opportunity then comes from doing that damage, which it makes up, as we know, from hit points being the theoretical point system for assigning damage, combination of luck, of guidance, of totems, of spirit, strength of will, fighting ability, practice, martial art, whatever, all of that, as well as physical robustness. And that's what makes up hit points, that's what makes up an attack, that's what makes up defense, that's what makes up all of that. And so trying to make it a little bit more dynamic, you can move people around, and when you're showing them the picture of, okay, you're here, then next round, this is how you've moved. You're now in this position here. And then they say, well, hang on, why am I over here? Well, you were pushed, you lost combat, and you just, out of 6 points of damage potential, they've done 6 damage to you, so they hit you hard. Now you've moved into this corner, because that's what they're aiming at. Just like if the players said, we want to push the orcs into a corner, or we want to push the goblins to separate them, or we want to draw them, we want to engage but then pull them back and draw them into a trap. That's what the players are doing. That's what the players want to achieve. They have to actually say these things. It's not an assumed knowledge that it's going to happen. There's a degree of leeway, of course, but so anyway, so there's a lot for the DM to think about and a lot for them to work out. Now, this doesn't fall under the category of things that the DM has to have worked out beforehand, know how to move or how to combat, but it's definitely next level in terms of, okay, you've got the game under control, you've got everything moving, you've got it all going. How can you improve the players, and how can you switch it up a little bit? And that's where it comes in terms of, right, here we go. We have maneuverability and movement. All right, so I want to thank everybody for all their support, and it's great. So we've got GrogCon coming up in Orlando, and we have so I've got a few weeks over there, and I'm there for that. For those of you who are in the US, if you're anywhere near there, stop on by, come and see how it's all going. There's numerous games running. QuestCon, I think it is the overall, the actual convention, followed by, and then GrogCon's attached to that, part of the Grogtalk thing. Get into it, have fun. It's good. It'd be good to see the people that I talk to and so on. But we'll get some pictures, we'll get some footage about what's happening, and we'll film it all out. We'll see where it's all going from there. But anyway, well, thank you very much. Again, thanks, guys. Appreciate all of your support. I'm so glad that you're on fire with everything. Now, if you've got any other questions, if you've got any thoughts, if you've got any processes you want to sort of run through or whatever, of course, just comments. I love comments and I love engaging, and I can talk about this all day, every day, which is good because, well, with time zones, it's all day, every day. All right, well, thank you very much, and stay safe, everyone, and we'll get on with something from GrogCon. All right, ciao.